This video was made possible by Wix. If you are ready to create a website, head over to wix.com/go/infographics to try out one of their premium plans right now. As you might have seen in our Worst Punishments show, humanity has come up with some very gruesome forms of executing people throughout history. Ever hear the phrase thrown to the lions, which the Romans called damnatio ad bestias? Well, not just lions, but all kinds of wild animals might have been called upon to execute people in the past, including being sat on by an elephant. Or what about having your insides ripped out and your limbs torn off? Being literally broken with clubs when tied to a wheel, having insects eat your insides, or having your ribs pulled through your back into the shape of the wings of an eagle. Yep, humans have been brutal to one another throughout history. Maybe hanging, lethal injection, beheading, or firing squad don't seem so bad by comparison. But today, we'll focus on one specific form of execution. In this episode of the Infographics show, how does the electric chair work? We'll start with a little bit of history before we get into the specifics of the apparatus. As the story goes, in the 1870s and 1880s, many people in the United States were being electrocuted by high voltage street lighting. This was a new phenomenon, and it got some people to thinking about execution. You see, public executions at the time didn't always go well, and botched hangings often upset the more sensitive folks that came to watch the spectacle. In fact, because of so many botched hangings, there was talk over the years about ending capital punishment altogether. Then came along a New York dentist and engineer called Alfred P. Southwick, who led the charge, excuse the pun, to create a more humane form of punishment in the electric chair. He reached out to none other than Thomas Edison to fund his project. Apparently, Edison was against capital punishment and was at the time involved in a commercial battle with engineer Nikola Tesla. Edison was a proponent of DC or direct current and Tesla of AC or alternating current. Some say Edison gave the electric chair project to Tesla because he was against capital punishment, while others say he did that for selfish means because if AC was associated with a death chair, people wouldn't want that in their houses. According to ABC Science, Edison created an advertisement that read, "Do you want electrocutioner's current in your children's bedroom wall?" It said Tesla and his backer, George Westinghouse, didn't want their generators to power the death chair, but Edison secretly funded a project for the electric chair that would use alternating current. The chair was built using AC, and the first execution was of a William Kemmler, who had been found guilty of killing his wife in a drunken rage with a hatchet. He was executed on August 6, 1890 in Auburn Prison, New York. The victim is said to have spent 17 seconds with 1,000 volts passing through his body. At that point, as the story goes, someone shouted, "Great God, he's alive!" Still conscious, the guards turned up the electricity to 2,000 volts. According to History Today, Kemmler's skin began bleeding, part of his body was seen to be singed, and a horrible smell spread through the death chamber. At the time, the New York Times wrote that the stench was unbearable. He died, and Edison carried on his campaign against AC after that. Southwick, who was credited with the invention of the chair, though there were really many more people involved, is rumored to have said, "This is the culmination of 10 years' work and study. We live in a higher civilization today." If you look at botched executions throughout history, the chair wasn't exactly botch-proof. The worst botch execution, in what became known as Old Sparky, was that of James Wells on March 10, 1922, at Arkansas State Penitentiary in Little Rock. The poor black 18-year-old had been found guilty of killing a white person. Apparently, he had to be jolted 12 times before he died. Then, a year later, according to the book Gruesome Spectacles, Botched Executions and America's Death Penalty, a man called F.G. Bullen was electrocuted, pronounced dead, and after being placed in a coffin, was found to be breathing. He was subsequently returned to the chair and shocked another 5 times for good measure, and they said hanging was brutal. The last use of Old Sparky in the USA was on January 16, 2013, although according to CNN, the following states still use the method: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. You can also still be gassed, shot, or hanged in some states, although lethal injection is now the execution of choice. So, how does it work? Before the prisoner is sent to the chair, he or she will have their head and calves shaved. This is so the electrodes that are fastened to the leg and head have better contact with the body. The prisoner is fastened into the chair by the wrists, waist, and ankles. They will usually be blindfolded and sometimes even be wearing a diaper. One, of course, loses control of bodily functions when one is being fried by electricity. One witness to the execution in 2007, a former Gulf War veteran and convicted child killer Darrell Holton, explained that the prisoner was wearing a cotton prison uniform, all white. He wrote, "The guards then performed the laborious process of placing the straps and belts about Daryl's body. This took, in my estimation, perhaps as long as 10 minutes. Wet sponges were then placed between the metal contacts and the prisoner's skin. This is to better conduct the charge. The guards cleaned everything up, and at about this time, Holton started to hyperventilate due to fear. A metal headpiece was then put on Holton's head, which also had a wet sponge underneath it. Holton was asked if he wanted a blindfold, but this turned out to be something large that more resembled a welder's mask. When everyone was out of the room, with witnesses watching, a loud electrical whirring was heard. The current was applied for 15 seconds, discharging up to 2,000 volts, which should stop the heart of the prisoner. According to the writer, Holton then slumped over, but he was hit again with a lesser voltage for a further 20 seconds to damage all the remaining organs that might be working. At this point, Holton's body convulsed. The writer concluded, "The state officials had acted with all the courtesy and care possible. I felt for those who had to participate in this electric ritual of death." He also said that lethal injection was still far more humane. So, does it hurt? That's the million-dollar question. Most experts think these days it would not, but in the past, when there was a malfunction, it certainly could have hurt. But anyway, who really knows except those who died, and they can't really tell their story. But what actually happens to the body when it's electrocuted like this? Electrocution leads to paralysis of the brain's respiratory centers and stops the muscles pumping the heart. Sometimes the body will become very hot, even burnt, and the eyeballs can protrude. The facial muscles will also contort, as you can well imagine. When both shocks are finished, doctors examine the body, while in the witness room, the blinds are drawn. Then you might hear an announcement such as this one in Tennessee. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the legal execution of Daryl Holton. The time of death, 1:25. Please exit. This is a pretty horrible way to end this video, so let's talk about something more fun for a second. Do you have an up-to-date website? If not, Wix is a super easy, yet professional and robust platform for creating, managing, and hosting your website. You can use a custom domain for anything, from a blog to a website for a restaurant. Wix does all the heavy lifting. You can finally create that amazing website that you've been too afraid of making because maybe you just didn't know how by going to wix.com/go/infographics or by clicking the link in the description. Don't wait until it's too late. Get a head start today with the amazing website you deserve. So, what do you think about this form of execution? Is it humane or not? Do you believe we should have capital punishment altogether? How would you be executed if you could have the choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called How Does Lethal Injection Work? Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time!